I knew the traditional track wasn't for me. I just didn't know what other options were out there. And so I want to be pretty much be almost like a living testimony of, hey, like there are other options from there. Even if you come from where I come from and you don't have like whatever everyone else has, like there are other ways to go out there and make a very big impact in this world. And I'm just going to prove it to everyone.
John, how are you?
Hey, Jill, I'm doing great, and I'm excited for our conversation today. And so, can't be any more excited to see what you got going on and be a part of this new thing that you have going on as well.
Oh, good. Yes. Thank you for coming on the show, Beyond Boundaries. And, what we're doing is we're interviewing some people that I've, connected with in the past. And we had a brief moment in an Uber, I believe, and you just
Yeah.
really impressed me. And most of all, because of your age.
Yeah.
So let's kind of give our audience a little background of who John is, what you do, and do you mind sharing how old you are?
Of course, I don't mind. I'm still at an age where that stuff doesn't matter. I still have another like 20 years or so before that comes into play, right? But
You do.
so my name is John Mendez, right? I'm the founder of Walk to Wealth podcast. My mission there is to enlighten and empower young adults to build wealthy, abundant lives. I like to say that fulfills my purpose. And then what fulfills my pockets is I'm also the founder of Stop and Stare Media, where I help realtors create a year's worth of content in an hour using AI. And so I just turned 22, literally 2 Saturdays ago. So it was very fresh. I'm not sure when it's going live. So September 2nd, I turned 22. And we
Happy
met
birthday.
a couple weeks. We went in July. So yeah, that was 2 months before I turned 22. So I was still 21 when we first met.
Yeah, you look young, but when we were talking, I felt like I was talking to a 50-year-old. You've accomplished so much. You're very driven. You have this amazing mindset. And I just kind of want to dig deep a little bit and learn more about, where you came from. Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about your childhood.
Yeah. And so let me take you in a time machine, which is actually it's gonna be a quick ride because my childhood was like literally not that long ago. But to take you back in the time machine a little bit. So I grew up in the projects. It was 9 of us in a 2 bedroom. So very crammed in there. My bed, I didn't have an actual bed to sleep on until probably like my fifth grade year of elementary school. So I was sleeping on a couch at first, and then I graduated to the little spring up couches that you kind of have to like pop open. So I was on one of those beds for a little while. And then fifth grade year is when I finally got my own bed. Grew up, we had Section 8, right? For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's government subsidized housing. So we had housing vouchers and stuff like that. Had people help us out, food stamps, EBT, the whole 9 yards. Like money was super tight growing up. My grandparents were the ones that raised me on the Dominican side of the family. So that's where I get like my charisma, my swagger from, my energy. My grandpa is the most stereotypical Dominican man that you could ever find. Like super confident, chin up, chest out all the time, maximum like energy. Like he walks in a room and like he is the room. Like wherever he is, the room is. Like he's one of those guys, super confident guys, like super typical Dominican guy. And so those two raised me. My mother, she suffered from mental health issues. So she wasn't the mother that I really needed her to be. Not really her fault, but as a kid, I couldn't really grasp that and understand that. So my mom fought a lot growing up. And then my father, he was an alcoholic in his younger years. And before he switched down, he actually an entrepreneur now. He has his own landscaping business, just doing great. But during my childhood, he was also very absent. And my family did a really good job of sweeping a lot of stuff under the rug. So there's still a lot I don't know about my upbringing and probably a lot that I'll never figure out. And for me, it's one of those things where like growing up, it was like that was all that I knew. So the question of like, tell me about your upbringing, a lot of people from the outside looking in would like maybe pity me or like, oh my goodness, you must have had it so hard. But that was all I knew. So for me, I genuinely enjoyed my upbringing. Like that was just life for me. I didn't have anything to compare it to. It's not like I was born into a wealthy family and then everything got taken away. It's like, no, we were just born into poverty. Like, boiling cold water, boiling water to make it hot in the winter. Sometimes lights is going out, like the whole 9 yards. We had roaches, mice, all that stuff growing up. But for me, that was just kind of life. So that's kind of like my early childhood and my upbringing. That's like what I kind of was sprouted out of, I like to say.
Uh-huh. So did you, when you were growing up, did you know you were poor, or just everyone was poor? So
Now, great
you just
question. Yeah.
didn't know.
I think everyone was poor. Everyone was like really poor. It's like we all like didn't really have money, and the project building I grew up, they were pretty badly maintained. So it was like not like it was some people in there that had a little bit better off. Like we all had it pretty rough. Like, and it's one of those things where it kind of helps shape you. And for me, growing up, I think the first time I realized like what like wealth kind of like at least monetary wealth looks like is my eighth grade year. One of my friends, he had his dad's bosses. Ha We went to his dad's boss's summer house in the Hamptons over in New York.
Mhm.
And like that's the first time I seen like FU money, at least the closest thing to FU money. Cause they're in their basement at that summer house. There's like six beds, a ping pong table on the right hand side when you go first to go down the stairs. Then if you take a left, you walk down this little hallway. And then the first left there is a mini movie theater that probably sat like 20, 25 people, probably. Right. And then from there you walk down, take a right, and then there's like a sauna room, a yoga room, a little stretching room, and then they had like a whole mini gym in there the size of like a regular, like a high school classroom almost. Maybe probably a little bit bigger than a regular high school classroom. All in just the basement. Then the house around it like had like a full-size pool, a jacuzzi, a full court tennis basketball hoop, a basketball court, and then a tennis court. And then like around the whole house was like a paved, like almost not fully paved, but like mostly paved go-kart track around the entire premise. So that was like the first time I seen like people like with real money. And for me, as I said, not having much, it helped me realize that there's like a, an abundance of wealth out there. And I didn't really know what that was like because where I was from, as I said, I grew up, I didn't even have a car, right? I had to get my own car, which was 2 years. Wait, was it last year's when I first got my car? And growing up, I said we walked everywhere. But over there, like their average car, like what people would call a Toyota Camry in the regular world, was like their Porsche Cayenne. Like everyone just had a Porsche Cayenne over there. And that was just like the starter. And it only got better from there. But that was probably like the first time I realized like there's a whole lot of money out in that world that some people have access to that I didn't have. But I wasn't very entrepreneurial growing up. So although it was like very eye-opening and shocking, it didn't spark, the entrepreneurial bug quite yet.
Were you thinking, were you jealous, or
Yeah.
were you angry, like, wow, like there's all this money out there and I don't have
Yeah.
any of it? Or were you thinking, wow, there's opportunity?
I was thinking like this is amazing. Like this is fun. Mind you, I didn't have to pay for anything on the trip. They took care of me, right? They invited me. I was their welcome guest. So I was just enjoying everything. I don't think there was a
Mhm.
dull moment there. The only thing that sucked is like well, they can't cook as good as my grandma. So, I guess there's pros and cons to everything. But, aside from that, it was a good old time when I went there. I don't remember having any negative feelings or any types of jealousy or resentment or negativity or just any negative emotion stir up when I was there. I was just having a blast. I was too busy having fun. I was enjoying the pool. We were playing basketball up to like midnight. We were just having a blast, and I was there. So for me, I know some people may see that and be like, oh, why not me? Why can't we have that? But for me, I was like, man, this is my friend, and I get to be with him. Like I'm having a good old time while I'm here.
What a good attitude. Because I know a lot of people would not think that, you know?
Yeah,
So you grew up in a house or an apartment of 9 people. You lived with
yeah,
your grandparents, your parents. Do you have siblings?
yeah. So it was grandma, grandpa. It
Mhm.
was my mom, my aunt, my uncle and his wife. So my aunt, my cousin, my sister, and I think my other uncle, if I'm not mistaken. All in that little two-bedroom. So the way it was
Oh
set
my.
up is like I would be on the couch, and then next to on a spring up bed, like the little one that you flip open or whatever,
Mhm.
would be my uncle. Then my grandpa and my grandma, and I think my mom would be in one room, and then in the other room would be like almost everyone else. And my sister had like a little crib. Yeah, I don't know. I forget how we fit everyone. It was like one of those clown cars thing, but instead of a clown car, it's like a clown house. It was just like we figured out some way how to like, stuff everyone in there. Um, but as I said, it managed to work out pretty well. As I said, I don't remember really having much. It's hard to remember my childhood, even though it was right there. I don't know why, but for me, it's just like I don't really remember too many bad parts about it. As I said, that's just kind of what life was. So I didn't have
Mhm.
anything really to compare it to try to say, hey, this sucks. It was just
Yeah.
life. And so it was like I had a good old time as a kid. And I think it's probably because it's like as a kid, whatever you're born into, that's like the norm. And since that was the norm for me, I just thought everyone kind of just struggled like that, at least when I was younger. So I didn't really see anything out of the ordinary with my situation.
Yeah. Did you end up, did you go to college? Did you get good grades in school? And
Yeah, so I was supposed to be the golden child, right? I got good grades in school. I went to church growing up. I played sports, never got in trouble in school. I graduated high school with a 3.5, 12, 30 on my SAT, got into 13 colleges, five of which offered me like D2, D3 scholarships for football. So school always came relatively super easy. And even though I didn't really apply myself that much, I did enough to get by and nothing more, which led me to get pretty decent grades. And I went to the University of Connecticut. That's
yes.
the state school, so financial aid was a lot easier on me. And I
Mhm.
knew my grandparents wouldn't have the money to afford it, and so I didn't want to burden them at all. So I made sure I did what I had to do to get to that next level in life, so that they wouldn't have to worry about anything. And so I went to UConn, loved it up there. My first year I had a 3.78. Towards the end of my first year, though, that spring semester, this is now 2020. So
Mhm.
March 2020 is when the pandemic took over the world. And so after that, a little bit of context. I knew going into college that college was a scam. I was reading
Mhm.
some study back when I was in high school, so the numbers may be different now, but at that point in time, it was like from 1960 to when I was looking it up back in high school, the price of tuition has gone up like 60 something percent. And then at that same time period, the prices of wages have only gone up about like 19%. So I knew this before I even got stepped foot in college. I was like, yeah, this tuition thing and college degree thing is definitely a big scam. As I said, this
Mhm.
is still before I sparked that entrepreneurial bug. But I was like, all right, I'm gonna go there to network and learn how to live my own because that's invaluable, right? Connections and becoming an adult, right? So I was like, I'm gonna go to college. Went there, I got involved in a bunch of clubs. I got involved in a fashion show. I was getting involved in my learning community at college. I was doing it all. Like I was that freshman superstar, like ideal college student, right? I was doing everything. I was still having fun. I was like the ideal. And my grandparents and the rest of my family thought I was going to be the first Mendez to graduate college, right? Pandemic happened. Fast forward a little bit. Now, me and one of my friends, we would always talk about like, investing and things like that. And one day I was working at the restaurant this time and I didn't have a car. So I usually would work at the restaurant dinner shift, clock in 5, clock out almost 11:30, 12 o'clock. And then I would walk home, which was about a 45-minute walk for me. And he would clock out at the same time. So we would walk and he would go downtown. So we would split ways. But one day he told me to invest in Tesla, right? And I was like, bro, why? Like, I don't know anything about investing. He was like, John, they're having a 5-1 stock split. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I was
Mhm.
like, a 5-1 stock split. He was like, yeah, like the price is gonna like turn into a fraction. I was like, okay, what do I do? He was like, we're getting a refund, right? Because as I said, pandemic took over the world. So we didn't
Mhm.
have to pay for room and board now, right? So we're all getting a college refund from our financial aid. So I was like, he was like, take some of that money and I'd probably invest it in Tesla. And I was like, are you gonna do this? And he was like, I can't right now, like financially, because he was helping support his sister. And because it was him, his sister, and his sister's kid, and because their parents were back in Haiti. So
Uh,
he kind of had to step into adulthood a lot sooner. So he had to help out around the house a lot more. So he was like, nah, I can't, I don't have the money right now. And I was like, okay, so I did it. And I think that's what kind of sparked the bug in me a little bit. But I said, I think that planted the seed. Then for whatever reason, I invested in Tesla, did what he said, right? I think I put
mhm.
like close to like 1,400 in. Fast
Mhm.
forward a couple months, now November. For whatever reason, I found myself walking into Barnes and Noble. I still can't remember the reason why, but I bought Rich Dad Poor Dad, Index
Mhm.
Funds for Dummies, and I think the third book was I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And so the first book out of the three that I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Mhm.
And after reading that book, right, I realized that there was another way of viewing the world that wasn't being taught in school, wasn't being taught in my environment, but more importantly, wasn't being taught at home. So
Mhm.
I was like, man, I got to find out more about this information. And that's for me when the entrepreneurial bug sparked in. I just started consuming all this information on like personal finance and entrepreneurship and credit cards and index funds and all these different things. And that kind of where the journey started for me.
That's awesome. Rich Dad Poor Dad is, I think I read it 3 times. I mean, it's so eye-opening, right? To how the world really works. And
Yeah.
um, did you have a mentor, anybody that guided you, maybe when you were a child or in your teenage years, that said, look, there's a way out of this?
Yeah. So for me, it's hard to point a finger. Not having someone to look up to, for example, my parents, right?
Mhm.
For me, it's like I never had a role model, which is probably the biggest blessing I could ever have. Because what I did was I would just take all these different people that I come across, and I would try to take the best traits out of them and, put those into my life. And then all the negative traits or the bad traits that I didn't like, I would leave out. So as I was growing up, I kind of just became this giant melting pot of all of these different perspectives and viewpoints. And I would just try to take the best of everyone and do that in my life. And then from there, as I got older, it just kept on growing. And once I got to middle school, remember we used to have like these things where like they would pick a side, what's better, pizza or ice cream, or what's better, this or that, and just have random things just to spark discussion or debate in the classes. And I would always go to the side that had less people intentionally, regardless of what I believe, just so I can have more to debate and more fun arguing. So I was
Mhm.
always into like putting myself into different perspectives and gaining new ideas. And as I got older, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And just being very open minded, it helped me to, as I said, take all these different perspectives and really become a lot wiser than most people my age. And then once I started podcasting, it's like that just amplified it tenfold, because now I can get all these different people from all these different places in the world. And it's not just local people that I'm talking to, it's people from everywhere that I get to talk to and get all these new perspectives. But I think I've been blessed with the gift of wisdom.
Yes.
And as I said, I didn't realize it until around high school. That's when I started to realize like how I viewed the world was a little different than most people my age. And from
Mhm.
there, as I said, I just kept on growing. And I really do think I have an old soul. The more the older and older, I know I'm still very young, but the more I age, I guess, right? Or the more experience I get, the more I realize how much of an old soul I really do have.
You do. Yeah. Is your sister the same way?
Now, she's actually very different than me. She was
Is
like a
she?
rebel. She was the problem child, right? Or whatever. But yeah, me and her. But one thing that she had that I never had is she was kind of born with that entrepreneur spirit. Like I remember in middle school I'm 6 years older. So when she was in middle school, she had people making slime for her, selling slime, and then paying her the money. And she was just managing this little slime operation in middle school. Like she always had that in her.
Smart kid.
I think we all have it in ourselves. From what I realized from talking to so many people, I think everyone has that entrepreneur in them. Then there's
Mhm.
three types of people. There's people who are born with it and are born into an environment where that's kind of just fostered and continue to grow and flourish. Then I feel like there's people who are born with it, lose it, and then somewhere along the way they pick it back up or they rediscover it, which is I think most of the entrepreneur world. And then there's a third kind of people who are entrepreneurs born with it and then lose it and never ever pick it back up.
Which
And
is so sad.
it is. And the thing that I realized is like, I think the only difference between entrepreneurs and kids is that entrepreneurs have businesses. Like, that's the only
Yeah.
difference. Like, entrepreneurs are just adult kids, essentially. We're
They,
visionaries. We have ideas and we turn that into a way to receive profits and make impact in the world. Whereas
and
kids, they just
so,
have all these big ideas and just have fun with it. So, like,
yeah.
we're kind of almost like big kids, almost in a way. And for me, rediscovering it was like, the best thing ever, because growing up I was never really worried about money despite us not ever having money. And then all these traits that I learned from football and a couple other jobs that I had here and there and all these different things that I did, it's like once I applied that to entrepreneurship, I picked it up naturally and I just kind of started running with it.
Mhm. Well, I love what you said about not worrying about money, because even though you didn't have any, that's one of the things that it's hard to explain to people, that if you live in like this mindset of scarcity,
Yeah.
you'll never have money no matter what. And even if you do get lucky and you get money, you're going to lose it because
Yeah.
you don't have this idea of abundance in your life always. And once you realize that we have everything we already need and everything we already want, and it just flows in and out. I mean, the stress, first of all, goes way down, and and then things just happen. Opportunities
Yeah.
come your way. Money just happens. It just comes. And having that faith that it's going to be there when you need it, that's the
Mhm.
hard part for a lot of people. So what do you suggest? Would you explain that to somebody, maybe a young person,
Yeah.
about, a scarcity versus abundance mindset?
Yeah, I think there's a something one of the most profound things I've probably heard in my little journey so far is I've got to spend a day with a billionaire. Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams, got to spend a day with him, and me it was about me and about 200 other kids, but I had the best seat in the house. So, you know, what can I say? I got to be right front and center. And one of the things he talked about is the idea of first creation and second creation, and how we all live two lives. The first life is the life we live in our heads, right? That plays on in the subconscious, right? And then the second life is what we actually live out and manifest into the reality, right? What actually happens in our day to day. And there's another quote that I heard from someone else, but really kind of goes well with this, is that where we are today is just an accumulation of our past thoughts,
Mhm.
right? And so in order to change where we want to be tomorrow, we have to change our thoughts now, right? And so when we realize that the reason why we either have a lack or some type of mass abundance of wealth or somewhere in the middle is all
Mhm.
because of what we think about, whether we realize it or not, and how we view ourselves. Who do we believe to be? Do we believe that we're worthy of money? And there's a lot of things that you kind of have to unpack. It's a very complicated question to answer, the scarcity versus abundance mindset. But I say jokingly all the time that I'm not broke. They're just a delay between when God's abundance actually reaches my bank account,
Right.
and I'm
Yes.
not sure when the delay is gonna get fixed, because it's all in God's time and not mine. But as I said, having that faith, as you said, it'll all work out. And I think that every glass ceiling that we have to break through in our lives was also built by our own hands. And so once we realize that we're the only thing in our own way, as you said, we already have everything within. And so
Mhm.
it's like once you realize that, it's like, well, what's stopping me now besides me? And I know that it's me. So it's like, how do I stop me from stopping me? And then
Mhm.
from there, I think that allows you to start really opening doors. And as I said, having that true belief of that, whether or not this ends up working out doesn't mean that I'm a failure or not, right? Or a success or
Right.
not. There's a little philosophy law. It's like the law of detachment. And so if
Mhm.
you could detach yourself from the outcome, that'll help you to start adopting that abundance mindset, because you're not going to be so hard pressed as to the right now, because you know
Mhm.
what's coming. And when you can
Right.
do that, when you act out of abundance, you'll be able to receive so much more, right?
Mhm.
There's like, for example, when I teach social media classes or marketing class in AI, and a lot of times the realtors like, John, like, why do you just share everything? Like, you should be charging for this. And it's like, you're totally right. I should, and I could, but I choose
Mhm.
not to, right? Because I know it'll all come back and then some. Right.
Right.
And so it's like a lot of people play the cards close to their chest, and they want to hide everything or want to always keep an ace up their sleeve. And for me, it's like, no matter what happens, I know that I'm going to be good and it's all going to work out. And so,
Mhm.
of course, I'm not going to be naive and not act like there's people out there who are malicious and have ill intent. But also, it's like, I'm not going to be scared to give abundantly, give freely, and give and then some, right? Because I'm
Right.
operating the game from an abundance mindset and not worried too much about the actual tangible resources that I may have in a current present day.
Yeah, it just kind of flows, right? So you have to
Exactly.
be in a flow state with everything, and money is one of those things, as long as you keep it flowing. And I believe that if I don't have the money today, it's because I'm not supposed to have it, because I will spend it on something I'm not supposed to be spending it on. So it will come to me when I need it, for
Yeah.
what's really what I can do really good, when I can do good things with it.
Yeah.
Right. So so tell me about the transition. So you
Yeah.
stopped going to college, you made some money in Tesla, and what happened then?
So actually, what happened was with that winter break, right? I ended up going. So now this is the December of 2020, entering into the beginning of 2021. I started watching tons of YouTube videos, podcasts, books, whatever I could get my hands on. Just started going through the giant rabbit hole, and I ended up buying this course on wholesaling. And I was going to start wholesaling real estate. and I was gonna get into it. It said no credit needed, no cash needed. I was like, well, perfect for a broke college student, right? In the
Yeah.
middle of the pandemic with nothing but time. Got my logo, my domain name, my LLC filed. I was ready to get it going. Started calling up some attorneys. Connecticut is an attorney closing state. So I
Mhm.
started calling up some attorneys and I was like, I'm ready to get this going. I want to do XYZ. You know, how does this work here? And one of the attorneys who didn't know anything about investing, that's neither here nor there, but he was like, oh, you can't do this in Connecticut. You have to be a licensed realtor to transact in real estate. The only caveat is most of the time wholesaling is off market, meaning I don't need a real estate license to do anything off market. Generally speaking, right? Check with your
Right.
state or county or municipality or whatever, right? And then from there, I was like, okay, you know, maybe this is not for me. And then fast forward a little bit more, I end up deciding to take my real estate classes. And once I decided to do that, now this is February of 2021, I stopped showing up for all my college classes, and then I never looked back. And now back to what I said earlier about being the golden child, everyone in my family was against the idea of me dropping out. But remember when I said back in high school, I made sure that I didn't burden anyone with the decision of me going to college. So me going to college was entirely, for the most part, on my own. Like, I mean, of
Mhm.
course, I had a couple help. There's a couple people in a couple groups that helped me get to college. But aside from like in terms of family, like they
Mhm.
didn't chip in financially or help out with the decision at all. Right. I got help from other people so that I could do it on my own, I guess, but not really on my own. And now, so then when I just dropped out, everyone had their 2 cents to say. And there's a part in the hero's journey that I love called the atonement of the father. And in that portion, it pretty much talks about how, in order for the hero to step into the hero that he's truly meant to be, the person that he holds in highest regards have to die off, metaphorically. So
Mhm.
in most cases, their father, but well, that could be whoever, your father, your grandpa, your grandma, your auntie, your babysitter, your teacher, whoever it is, your coach, whoever it is that person is that holds, you know, whose opinions of you holds control over your life. Like once that person's opinions of you dies off, that's when you're able to truly flourish. And for me, I could care less about anyone in my family had to say at that point in time. So I drop out with a smile on my face because I knew it's like, this is what I'm going to get into now. And so that's when I got into real estate. I ended up working about 70 hours. I was working at K Jewelers about 30, 35 hours. And at the restaurant, about another 30, 35 hours on top of studying for my real estate exam. I ended up failing the first 2 times. But then 2 weeks after I turned, well, I think the week I turned 20, I got licensed. 2 weeks after I turned 20, I ended up getting going with Keller Williams. And then from there, now this is September 2021. So almost 2 years ago to this day, actually, I ended up getting licensed with Keller Williams. Along that way, about 4 months after that, ended up starting to do my podcast, which is a whole nother backstory. And then I ended up starting to teach social media the month after that, which is a whole nother backstory. But that's kind of where I went from there. It's just like every day, and that part of my life when I was studying and working was kind of just felt like every day was Monday because I would
Mhm.
wake up, I'll get ready for K Jewelers, right? Then I would work usually like 9 to 3 ish or something like that, 9 to 4 almost. Go home. I usually try to catch the bus and then go home. I would eat, change, and go to the restaurant. And then from there, work that till like almost 11 o'clock, walk home. Right. I was only gonna do one Uber a day. So it was either I was Ubering in the morning to work or Ubering back or Ubering to sign the whale. It's like I was only calling one Uber a day because I was uh let's say I was trying to be fiscally responsible because cheap is a bad word, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what my most weekdays look like. And then on weekends, some days I would work doubles. Now, during the pandemic, you couldn't have, at least in Connecticut, bars open unless you were also serving food. So
Mhm.
I would come in on weekends, do a double, sometime coming at 10:30, and then I would clock out almost maybe
Oh,
2 o'clock the next morning. And then I would have to probably clean up, maybe 2:30, I'm done, walk like 45 minutes home from there, and then come back on Sunday almost to do virtually the same thing again. So it was just like that time period of my life. I don't really remember much besides working literally every single day and then trying to fit in everything else whenever I could. I'd play basketball here and there, but aside from that, man, every day was the same day essentially.
so you were working your butt off to fund you because you knew you had bigger goals. So you
Mm,
were working to fund that,
yeah,
and you had your real estate license. At what
yeah.
point did you? Okay, so tell me the transition from quitting those, jobs working for other people to doing something for yourself.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a longer story. I'm very long-winded. I apologize to anyone
No, I love
listening.
it. No,
But
we
so
love it.
I got licensed as a realtor, as I said, right, September 2021. So around in just let's say January of 2022, I was in one of these real estate groups that I was in. The group's called Early Birds Talking Real Estate, free group on Clubhouse, and I would just tune in every morning. It's from like 6:30 to 7 a.m. And normally I'm at the gym at that time. Now, one day they were magically talking about social media, but as anyone knows, when you're in the gym, there's always weird people making awkward grunts and the background music, and then a bunch of heavy weights dropping all the time. So it's like not the perfect environment to share. And so I
Uh,
was like, all right, let me not share. Let me just type it up and then put it in the Facebook group. So that's what I did. I typed up what I wanted to say, and it was 5 quick, simple tips. And from there, I put it in the Facebook group, and a bunch of people started liking it and sharing and commenting. And I was like, oh, I guess they found it valuable. Then
mhm.
one of the hosts of the call, who was a millionaire real estate agent over in Boston, she was like, "Hey, John, you mind teaching a class on this?" And I was like, I never taught a class before. And she was like, "John, let us know when you want it scheduled." So I was like, well, I can't say no to this opportunity twice. So I decided to just figure it out. And I never hosted a class before, never hosted an Eventbrite or anything like that. So what I did was I ended up getting a Google form, right? From the Google form, it connected to a Google Sheet. And then from the Google Sheet, I would copy and paste manually everyone into my MailChimp. And then from the MailChimp, then I would send out the email invites with the Zoom calls to everyone. So after the first 2 days, I already had like 100 people register. And I was
Oh,
like, what on earth is going on here? And before the class, like I ended up teaching it. It was a week before family reunion, which is a big Keller Williams conference in February of 2022. So the day of the class, right before I taught, I checked it. I think I had like 380 registered. Right. I ended up getting 200 people on the Zoom call. And then after that, another 60 or so people registered afterward because they got wind of it and they all wanted to replay. So in total, for my very first class, I ended up getting about 440 realtors to sign up for it. And I just taught an intro to video social media class. And that's what's kind of sparked the teaching and the marketing stuff that I got going on now. And then from there, I taught another class on, to backtrack a little bit, before I taught that second class, family reunion was the week after. So I
mhm,
knew this going in. So I scheduled the class for the week before because the week of everyone would be traveling. I went to family reunion. I knew everyone from the class was going to be there in person at family reunion.
mhm.
So everyone knows me by my curly hair, right? And I used to have a lot more before I cut it. I used to have like for anyone watching the visual, the video version of this, I had like about maybe 4 times more hair than I do now. So just try to imagine that, right? So I went there with my hair in braids. So because you can never let them know your next move, mind you, everyone's expecting me to come with my hair out, right? So I go in there with my hair in braids, see everyone. That Sunday we're having a networking event. At the networking event, it was for people specifically in that group. So
Mhm.
that Sunday morning, I woke up extra early, took my braids out, washed them so my hair could be big and curly. And then I had a shirt that said "Stop and stare, just don't touch the hair." Right. And then from there, I went to the networking event. I kid you not, for that entire day, I was a little walking celebrity. Like people who I didn't know were taking photos with me just because they seen my shirt and they thought it was hilarious. Right. I had people left and right stopping me. For people in the classes, to people who just seen me and liked the shirt, just getting stopped the entire day. And then that evening, I had a digital business card. So this is before they were kind of popular. I think now a lot of people have them, but I had this digital business card called a dot card where you could tap your phone and then the thing would pop up. And now, as you know, being in real estate, most
Mhm.
realtors are a lot more seasoned than I am,
Yeah.
right? And most realtors are a little bit more behind in the tech game. So
Mhm.
for me, I had this giant curly fro with this obnoxious stop and stare shirt. And then I had this little digital business card that no one understood how to comprehend. So, and on top of that, the week before, I just taught this amazing class. So that was this giant marketing scheme that I kind of created to make the very most of this class opportunity, teaching opportunity, and it hit. It caught like a wildfire. So that second class I taught a couple months later, intro to TikTok, that had about another 400 people sign up for it. Then I got interviewed a couple times, and then fast forward a little bit. It was about September, October of 2022. This is when ClickFunnels 2.0 was about to do their launch. So they were doing
Mhm.
like a My First Funnel challenge. I forget what it's called. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start doing content creation services for realtors, right? And I was gonna do the challenge and kickstart my business. And so Mendez Media was taken. So I was like, what's the next best name? Stop and Stare Media. And for anyone who knew me before, it was a play on the Stop and Stare, don't touch the hair. But anyone knowing me now going forward, it's a marketing pun because when you're creating content, you need people to stop and stare. So it's a double play on words, depending on what, if you knew me before, you know the inside joke, or if you meet me coming forward, right? And that's how Stop and Stare Media started. Long story short, after my first client, I despised creating content for people. So that kind of went south. I had one client, I was like, yeah, I'm never doing this ever again. But January this year, right, I taught a class on ChatGPT. Now I joined a mastermind. I went on a podcast tour. I got interviewed a little over 100 times between January and March this year. And one of the guys that was interviewed me, his name is Jason. He has a mastermind. And I was on the fence. It was about $400 a month at that time. I think it's a little more expensive now, but it was about $400. And I was on the fence and I was like, man, I got it this month. But months 2, 3, and 4 and 5, I don't know about that. My money is a little tight because I was only at the restaurant now working part-time, right?
Mhm.
And wintertime restaurant, it gets really slow. So I was making close to no money, just barely enough to scrape on by. And I had a little bit of money saved up. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe the reason why I don't have any money is because I'm on the fence with my money. So I was like, let me just invest. In the mastermind, he had a course on how to use AI to create a course. I was like, how do I bring this to my realtors? Let me use ChatGPT to create a class on how to use ChatGPT. So I did a little bit of a spin from what he taught on. And so I taught the class that January. I had about 300 people. And from there, I upsold to a workshop for the very first time because everything up to that has been free for the most part. So it was 20 spots, 197 a spot. Within 24 hours, all spots were filled up. So I just made 4,000 on off a webinar that I used AI to virtually create the entire thing. And I was like,
Oh my gosh.
I'm playing the game wrong because there's no reason why I just made 3 months of what I get paid at the restaurant off of a class. And in this class, I literally used AI for virtually the whole thing. Like I didn't have to do much at all. I was like, yeah, I'm playing the game wrong. So then I ended up March. I created my first course. It's gonna be how to build your online presence through podcast guesting. And so I read Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. I was taking all the perfect webinar trainings, and I created my perfect webinar. And I had the $100 million offers book by Alex Hormozy. So I structured my course, and then I ended up getting on the webinar. At the end of the webinar, I pitched and I ended up getting 5 people to buy at $500. And for me, it was a disappointment because I thought everyone was going to be raving for it. I thought everything, but I learned one of my biggest lessons of don't create what people aren't asking for. Right. And
That's good.
also another big lesson I learned is don't create what people haven't bought yet. So that's the one thing I did right from that launch. I sold the course before I created it. Right. And so I
Mm.
had 5 people buy a course that technically didn't exist at the time. And then from there, I got to creating the course. Right. I had those 5 people and then a couple more trickled in. I ended up like around like 8 people afterwards. And I was just getting a lot of feedback from them. I had like 66 lessons, ended up taking like 2/3 of it. And then from there, I changed the name. I reorganized the flow of the course. I added a workbook. I added like a Facebook group to it. I put like audio versions of all the lessons in there. Like I was just adding a whole bunch of stuff, getting feedback, changing things left and right. And then in June, I was going to teach a big workshop. Now I read the book Launch by Jeff Walker. And in
Mhm.
he talks about, the PLF formula for launching. And I was going to do a workshop, four parts. Day 1, 2, and 3, I was going to teach. Day 4, I was going to pitch my course, right? The new version 2.0, right?
Okay.
And then from there, 2 weeks before that, I went to the very first Kajabi conference, Kajabi Hero Live in Austin.
Mhm.
And so I got as much feedback as I can from there, right? And then I took everything I learned in the PLF and the launch book and then combined it with some of the stuff I learned in Expert Secrets. And then from there, I created my workshop. I ended up getting about 350 people registered for it. And I was teaching them how to use ChatGPT to create content. Day
Wow.
1 went amazingly, right? Then I stayed after for like an hour of Q&A. Day 2 went great. And at the end of day 2, they were like, John, like, what's your Venmo? What's your Zelle? What's your Cash App? Like, you give us something. Like, we want to pay you. Like, we need to pay you. Like this shouldn't be free. And then day 3, taught again for an hour. And after day 3, like if you watch the replay, they were literally like almost fighting me because they were like, John, you said on day 2 that you were gonna give us your Zelle. Why are you blocking your blessings? Like let us give you money. But like
Oh
in the
my
back of my
gosh.
head, I'm like, I'm gonna pitch them on day 4. So I can't, take some of the reciprocity now. I gotta let the reciprocity build up and keep on building. And then
Yeah.
day 4, end up pitching. Now my course is $1,000, right? So I ended up pitching. The on day four, it was 65 people on the call. 20 of them bought right on the spot, right then and there, right? And then from there, I got another 13 to enroll throughout the rest of the week. But after day one, right after that webinar, I think I made net cash collected. I probably made like 18 or 19,000 right then and there. And I was
Wow.
like, all right. Later that afternoon, I drove over to the restaurant. I was like, thank you so much for everything. It's my time to go. I didn't say it like that. It was actually very bittersweet. I'm saying now just because I was so excited, but like in the moment, it was very bittersweet leaving the restaurant. But I was like, if I can't leave now after I just did this, then I'll
Mhm.
probably never leave. So I ended up putting my 2 weeks, and that was the rest of the restaurant. Like the rest is history, pretty much. And then as I said, I got another 13 people to enroll after that, and that's kind of how I got into what I got going on now, teaching AI and marketing. And I just literally, as I said, it came back a couple weeks, like this past week from teaching down in Atlanta on AI, and now I'm starting to get a couple local engagements on AI, and I'm gonna host my own event too on AI here in Connecticut. So it's like I'm starting to get some buzz and traction with the AI stuff. So I'm just sticking down that road and just keep on, trailblazing this new path.
I am amazed. Like that is just the coolest thing in the world. And it really just started because you had the courage to post something on Facebook on something that you heard on the community and or Clubhouse, right?
Yeah,
And you posted something and then you got an opportunity and you didn't say no. And I think that a lot of people get stuck because they're like, I don't know how to do that. You even said like, I've never done a class before. So I think
yeah,
people are so quick to say no rather than yes. And then just that one yes turned into this huge business that you're making a ton of money at just from that huge yes. And so do you like, I guess one of my questions would be, is confidence. Like
yeah,
you're doing these classes, you don't really have any guidance except for the books that you're reading, and
yeah.
but you're coming up with your own content. Do you ever feel like that imposter syndrome or like, what am I doing?
Yeah, no, I definitely felt that starting off because it's like all these realtors who are almost triple my age who sold more houses than I could ever. Because at that time with the first class, I only did one rental, right?
Mhm.
I did actually, in full transparency, I only done four rentals in real estate. I've been licensed 2 years now. I stopped focusing on it last year, so I don't really count anymore. But like that first year where I was actually focused, only did three rentals technically, right? So that first couple classes, I was like, yeah, like, and then after the second class I taught, they were asking me for my Zelle and Cash App and stuff like that. As I said, it was like, I didn't even feel worthy of receiving money at that time. I didn't realize this till later on, but I didn't feel worthy of receiving any money. And it was never my play. And I try to convince myself, like, no, this is just my way of giving back to the community. But it's like, regardless of whether it's giving back to the community or not, it's like good stuff should be rewarded,
Mhm.
regardless. And I was just doing everything in my power to fight against receiving any type of compensation, right? I was just doing it for free, and then people were telling me I should charge. And the lady who first said that I should be charging was the other co-host of the that early birds call, who was another millionaire agent down in Maryland, I believe she is. And
Mhm.
so it's like people, not just anybody was telling me to charge. Like the big shots were telling me to charge. The people who ran the group were telling me to charge.
Mhm.
I was just fighting everyone. I was like, I don't want to. It's not my intention. That's not what I plan to do. And the word confidence really comes. If you look at the root words of confidence, it's two main words. Is right. The first word is con, right? Con, con, stands for usually with, right?
Mhm.
And then fidencia, right, is the
Mhm.
other word, or fidence, I forget what it says. It's stands for trust. So if you look
Mhm.
at the word confidence, it's with trust. So someone who's high in confidence is high in self-trust. So the more you trust yourself with a situation, the more quote unquote confident you will be. And it's
Mhm.
because you don't trust yourself in that situation. Right, whether it's football, right? If I gave you the ball on the fourth, goal line, it's fourth down, and it's about to go, and the game's about to end, and you're down a touchdown. If I gave you the ball, do you trust yourself to run into the end zone and make it in the end zone? Do you trust yourself with whatever opportunity presented at you? And so, for people who lack confidence, just build up the trust that you have in yourself. And that starts small, like saying, hey, I'll be there at 3, and then you get there at 3:15, right? Or
Mhm.
3:05. It's like even little things like that affect everything. And it's like the more you can uphold your word, the easier it'll be for you to have trust, because you'll be building up the stack of evidence that you are trustworthy. And when you say something, it will get done, and that you are actually can thrive in that situation, and you will excel in that situation. And for me, I put in a lot of work into that very first class, lost a lot of sleep. I usually lose like my big classes, I usually lose a lot of sleep leading up to them just because like I'm trying to make sure everything goes amazingly. And it's
Mhm.
like all that time put in. And now even so, I'm more confident because I was creating content. It's not like I just watched a YouTube video and was like, all right, this is good stuff. Let me spin it off and go create a class on this. Right. It was like, no, I actually created all my own content. Right. I just got a video editor 2 months ago. Before that, I got to episode 104 on my podcast doing everything myself. I was posting hundreds of reels last year. I think I posted like over 400 reels last year. Right. All that stuff was getting posted, edited, uploaded by myself. So it's like, there was a lot of self trust that I was building, a lot of evidence to make
Mhm.
me more trustworthy. And the more I continue to grow forward, like on top of that, I feel like I'm also Dominican, so it just kind of built in. But like for anyone
Sure.
who's not Dominican, just stacking up that pile of evidence that you can trust yourself in that situation.
Mhm. It's your belief system, your
Yeah,
core belief system. If you believe you can do it, you can do it.
yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, if you can't, if you think that you can't, then you can't. So it's you do that. It doesn't look like you lack any self-confidence at all. And I mean, you're just amazing. You just have, you're so knowledgeable. You're highly intelligent. You're so aware eh, of the world, and it's so refreshing to see at somebody at such a young age to have that grasp. So tell me a little bit about your podcast now.
Yeah. So that story. So around the time where I got into real estate, around that same time, one of my friends that I grew up with was like, "Hey, John, like we should start a podcast." Because at that time we would always talk about life and goals and things we wanted to accomplish. She was like, "We should start a podcast." I was like, you know what, bro? That would be a great idea. And so he ended up going back to college. As I said, I already dropped out around September 2021, right? To get my real estate license. So I ended up getting licensed. He went back to school to start his junior year. Then from there, I procrastinated for about 3.5 months or so, 3, 4 months. And I finally thought of the name Walk to Wealth. And the whole story behind the name is for the 99% of us that aren't overnight sensations, it's a long walk to wealth. And some people may
Hmm.
walk quicker than others, but what good is sprinting to the finish line if you pass out when you cross it? And so that's how the
Love it.
name came about. And I knew I didn't want to start something where it's like, hey guys, I'm a 7-figure entrepreneur. Here's how I made my money. And it's like, no, I wanted to start something while I was still in ground zero or ground -1, right?
Right.
Starting from the scratch, didn't have anything really going for me, right? It's the middle of the pandemic. Went on to this entrepreneurship stuff on a whim, pretty much. And so it's like, I wanted to start it and document my journey along the way instead of waiting for me to hit the summit and say, hey, who wants to come up now? It's like, I want people to go with me. And the reason I
Mhm.
want to start it now is because it's so easy to tell everyone to come out to sea when you're already, 5 miles offshore, right? But it's
Right.
like I'm still loading up my ship. Like I haven't even left the dock yet. I'm still loading up my ship, right, and getting ready to embark on this journey. And I wanted to start documenting that so other people who similar to me that grew up in these situations in these environments where they didn't want to take the traditional track. As I said, I knew college was a scam going into it, and I knew for a fact I definitely didn't want to go corporate, even while I was in school before the pandemic. So I was trying to figure out like what am I gonna do? Because as I said, I knew the traditional track wasn't for me. I just didn't know what other options were out there, and so I want to be pretty much be almost like a living testimony of, hey, like there are other options from there. Even if you come from where I come from and you don't have like whatever everyone else has, like there are other ways to go out there and make a very big impact in this world. And I'm just gonna prove it to everyone, like while I'm doing it live instead of, as I said, instead of waiting for me to become this big shot or whatever, or become successful. And that's kind of how the podcast started. And I did about 7 episodes and I almost pod faded, right? I almost disappeared and never did it again. I remember my cousin, she texted me and was like, John, like, what's going on? It's been a couple weeks. You haven't posted anything. And that to me made me realize that there's someone out there that cares. And I
Mhm.
wasn't getting into, as I said, I didn't have a big followership. I was starting all this stuff from ground zero for the most part. And like someone cared enough to reach out. And
Yeah.
I was like, I got to keep it going. And so I started doing one a week and started running with that. And then right around December of last year, is when I had my like moment of like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what's
Mhm.
going on? And that's when I then started to hop on that podcast tour and start getting interviewed by a bunch of people. And I just started really taking my podcast serious and started dropping more episodes and started doing 2 a week. And now I'm at a point where I'm doing 3 a week now. And I'm starting to do a lot more solo episodes now because it's all interview style for a very large chunk of it. And now I'm
Mhm.
doing more solo episodes, sharing more of my journey and my story. And this entrepreneurship game is something that is the best blessing I could have ever had. And I'm so glad I found out about it when I did because the whole world was on pause. And so,
Mhm.
worst case scenario, if it all didn't work out, I would have just picked up where I left off and not had any ground lost because most people didn't do anything at all with their pandemic time. And so for me,
Right.
I kept the podcast going. And I think for me, it's been the biggest networking cheat code. Like I've been able to
Mhm.
meet so many people that I probably have no business reaching out to and
Mhm.
have full on conversations and get to know their backstory and their life story and how they were brought up and how they think about certain topics and how they built their business and their empire. And as I said, most of the people I probably wouldn't have no any business reaching out to on a regular. But it's like because I have this podcast now, and as the podcast continue to grow and scale, I get access to reach out to bigger and better people and people that I genuinely want to make genuine connections with, right?
Right.
And so now I'm at a point where I'm actually being a lot more restrictive with who I let on the show because you'll start to see this as the show continues to keep on posting episodes. People will come out the woodworks, people you've never seen before, never met before. They have no alignment with what your mission is or haven't even
Mhm.
listened to any of your episodes, and will send you these semi-personalized canned templates of how their guest is the best person to hop on your show. And it's like, I just want to do life with the people I feel like I'm most connected to. Right.
Right.
And like now I'm gonna start reflecting that on my podcast, right? And doing that. And I said, continue to make connection with people I genuinely want to connect and grow with and collab with. And also impact other people my age to show that, hey, there's something out there for you too if you want to go out and grab it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think we're probably similar. Well, I'm much older than you, but growing up, I always felt like I'm a little bit different, right? And I mean, I grew up very different than you grew up, but I still always felt like I was different than the people that were around me. And only until recently have I found my people. Like I
Mhm.
like and I noticed that age doesn't matter, right? We
Yeah.
are all it makes no difference, but we have the same common belief system. We all want to help others. We think outside the box. We don't fit into that corporate world. We don't fit into a lot of the belief system that, that a lot of the people that believe, what they believe. And
Mm.
so it's been really a cool journey so far, and it's you're a true inspiration to me because you've been doing this now for a couple of years, and you just kind of get out there and you just do it. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your journey. I really appreciate it. This has been such a great hour. Like I really enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, I just checked the time. I'm like, sheesh, we're
I
almost up.
know.
Yeah, oh my
I
goodness.
know. So thank you so much. I would love to, you want to tell everyone again what your podcast is and how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so if anyone interested in listening to the podcast, the best way to do so is whatever platform you do listen on, go to Walk to Wealth, and that's gonna help people, build a wealthy, abundant life. And for anyone listening that's more interested in AI content creation stuff, if you want to learn how to create a year's worth of content in less than an hour, if you go to stopandstare.media/chat GPT, you'll get there and you'll get my free course and put your email in, whatever. And from there you'll be able to start spitting out content like in seconds.
I cannot wait to see what your future looks like. Like it's going to be amazing. I had the honor of hearing John Maxwell,
Hmm.
leadership guru,
Yeah.
speak in Atlanta. I think it was last January, and he said something that just stood out. He said, "You have to get out of the people pile. Like everybody does the same thing." All
Hmm.
the time. They're just in this people pile. You got out of that people pile. I mean, just with your hair and that t-shirt, and you stood out and you did something different.
Yeah.
And people noticed you. So you're getting out of the people pile. You figured that out. So congratulations with everything that you're doing. And yeah, let's meet up again in, a few months, and let's see where this is taking you.
It sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Oh, thanks, John, so much for coming on the show.